The wind howled like a dying beast across the frozen plain of Virexno, sweeping fine white powder over the remains of what had once been Outpost Vega. Shattered metal ribs protruded from the snow like bones, and blackened scorch marks traced chaotic patterns across the ice. Amid the wreckage, Commander Elias Warren knelt behind a fractured comms dish, steam rising from his armor in the cold. His breath was ragged, visible, sharp against the frigid air. Blood streaked down the side of his face, already beginning to freeze in rivulets across his jaw. He wasn't alone. Across the open space, partially obscured by the smoke of burning wreckage, something moved with liquid precision. No sound, just the unsettling slither of black limbs gliding over debris. Elias didn't need to see it fully to know what it was. He'd faced it before, and it had come back. The Kshal-Zeret, an apex predator from beyond the mapped stars. Part muscle, part machine, its sinewed body was wrapped in biometallic armor, seamless and cruel. Its head, a polished dome without eyes, dipped low as it emerged from the mist. Elias stood, slowly. No sudden movements. His rifle was gone, ripped from his hands when the blast knocked him off the catwalk. He was alone, exposed, and very likely already dead. The creature paused, tasting the air with its mouth slightly parted, revealing rows of impossibly sharp teeth. Viscous saliva dripped in slow, deliberate strands. The two locked in a standoff, predator to predator. "You survived," Elias said, was hoarse. The Kshal-Zeret tilted its head. No vocal cords, no language, at least not one that humans could translate. But it didn't need to speak. The understanding between them was etched in blood and memory. Last time, Elias had spared it. He hadn't told anyone. During an OP on Kestrel-Teen, after a cave-in separated them from their units, they would face off. A stalemate. Elias had the drop, the element of surprise. But something in the creature's stance, wounded but defiant, had made him hesitate. He backed away instead of finishing it. A foolish, inexplicable decision. Now it was back. Not by accident. This wasn't chance. This was intention. From behind the creature, distant figures stirred, shapes moving in the storm. Elias recognized the silhouette of his squad, scattered and regrouping near the ridgeline. They wouldn't reach him in time. And even if they did, there was no guarantee they could help. The Kshal-Zeret advanced. Its claws crunched into the eyes with slow, methodical steps. No rush. No need. Elias held his ground, eyes locked onto the gleaming mask. He reached to his side and unhooked the combat knife strapped to his thigh. A stupid gesture. The blade was human steel, practical, effective, for a man. But this was something else. Still, he raised it. The creature stopped a meter away, so close Elias could smell the acidic tang of its breath. Its neck called slightly, tense. Ready. Then it leaned forward, jaws inches from his face. "Why don't you run?" came the voice, not spoken aloud, but transmitted. Direct neural translation, projected into his auditory cortex. Elias flinched, instinctively, despite having expected it. It wasn't the question that unsettled him. It was the tone. Curious. The words echoed with a strange cadence, reverberating not in his ears but inside his skull. The voice didn't belong to any gender or species. It was alien, ancient, and oddly familiar. He stared directly into its expressionless face, his own smeared with frozen blood, his hands trembling from cold and something deeper. Not fear. Not exactly. But the memory of it. "Why would I chase you twice?" he said. The silence that followed was total. No snow, no wind, no movement. For a moment, the world contracted into the space between them. Then the creature let out a low, guttural hiss, not aggressive, not warning, almost amused. It withdrew a half-step. A rare thing for something designed only to kill. Elias didn't lower the knife. He didn't blink. Behind him, one of the soldiers shouted his name, too far to make a difference. The creature's head twitched in that direction, registering the approaching reinforcements. It made a sound like a chuff, derisive, perhaps, and turned its gaze back to Elias. Without warning, it pivoted and vanished into the white storm, its long limbs slipping into the shadows like a wraith. Gone. Elias remained frozen, adrenaline burning through his veins, knife still clutched in his fist. Only when his team reached him did he lower his arm. What the hell was that? Ramirez gasped, eyes wide. Alpha, Elias murmured. You saw it up close. And Guyan asked. Sir, we need to evac. HQ said the Kshal are massing around the crater. We are exposed here. Elias nodded absently. He turned his head toward the direction the creature had vanished. Snow was already covering its tracks. Typical. Clean. Precise. Wasn't here for a fight, he said. Then what the hell did it want? Elias sheathed the knife. He didn't answer right away. It wanted to see what I'd do. They moved out as the snow thickened, a curtain between them and whatever watched from beyond. Elias didn't look back. He didn't need to. He knew it was still there. Waiting. Elias moved through the skeletal remains of the old mining tunnels, the walls sweating ice and darkness in equal measure. The steel beneath his boots groaned with memory. The outpost above was gone, ashes scattered in the wind, but down here, the past had teeth. It echoed in every creaking panel and shadowed alcove. The rest of the squad had pulled back per protocol. They believed Elias was returning to the central shelter point to regroup. He hadn't corrected them. This was his mission now. No orders. No objectives. Just the weight of something unfinished. His helmet lights cast narrow beams into the gloom. The silence was unnatural. Not empty, alert. Alive. He could feel it, like a pressure behind the eyes, a sense of being studied by something that knew patience better than hunger. He adjusted the charge on the wall-mounted explosive he'd just armed, third in a line of 5. Not enough to kill it, but maybe enough to box it in. The Kshal was relentless, but it wasn't mindless. It was studying him as much as he was studying it. That made it dangerous. That made it human, almost. He moved deeper into the tunnel, passing rusted machines and old drilling cores. This place had once been full of life, miners, engineers, supply bots. The colony had thrived briefly before the first raid. Before the Kshal. He paused in front of a jagged breach in the wall, a collapsed shaft that had once led deeper into the mountain. Now it opened into a yawning chasm. That was where it would come from. A predator would never use the front door. Elias knelt and opened the small case at his belt. Inside lay a small, silver token, a smooth disc engraved with an old Earth military emblem. He brushed his thumb over it, then slipped it back into his vest pocket. You shouldn't be down here alone, came a voice crackling through his earpiece. Ramirez. I'm not alone, Elias replied, voice low. You are not cleared for isolation ops. What the hell is this, sir? Elias disconnected the feed without answering. A scraping sound echoed from below. Not a stumble. A caress. The creature wasn't rushing. It was savoring. He backed toward the narrow corridor leading to the kill zone, a funnel of steel and eyes he'd chosen with care. Minimal exits, plenty of overhead piping and exposed fuel lines. The bombs were rigged to stagger, enough to destabilize the entire section. Not a cage, but a message. The darkness stirred. A shape emerged at the far end of the breach. First a limb, too long and jointed in unnatural ways. Then a glint of reflective black. It didn't roar. It didn't hiss. It simply stepped into view like it had always belonged there. Elias stood straight, hand resting lightly on the remote detonator in his palm. So you followed, he said, not expecting a reply. The Kshal tilted its head, the movement eerily similar to a bird of prey, evaluating distance. Its limbs spread, low and deliberate. It moved forward, not fast, but unstoppable. Elias held his ground, backing only when the thing crept too close. He wanted it deep in the kill zone. Just a few more meters. His heart was racing now, sweat crawling down the back of his neck despite the cold. "I have been thinking," he muttered, mostly to himself. "Why you let me live before? It wasn't mercy. You wanted to see what I'd become." The Kshal-Zaretha's pace slowed. It was listening. Elias took another step back. 10 meters. He could trigger the first charge now, but that would only slow it. He needed the moment. The eye contact. The unspoken truth between hunter and hunted. "You kill to dominate," Elias continued. "We kill to survive. That's what you don't get. That's why you lose." The creature stopped. They faced each other across the tunnel, mist swirling around them in the faint heat of their breath. The tension tightened like wire, the space between them filled with a silence more intimate than words. Then it lunged. Elias hit the trigger. The explosion bloomed behind it, not a flash but a thunderclap that threw shards of steel and fire across the tunnel. The creature staggered, howled, not in pain, but fury, and kept coming. He triggered the second charge. Then the third. The ceiling collapsed in a roar of steel and dust. By the time the fifth went off, Elias was already diving through a side tunnel, barely clearing the debris. He hit the ground hard, slid across the icy floor, and didn't stop until he reached the fur wall. The tunnel behind him was a sealed tomb. Smoke billowed out in choking clouds. He lay there, gasping, half-blinded, ears ringing. Then he heard it. The scrape. Soft. Persistent. Still alive. Of course it was. Elias pulled himself upright, bones screaming in protest. He didn't expect it to die today. That had never been the goal. He wanted it to understand. This wasn't a hunt. It was a war. The air stank of scorched metal and ozone. Sparks danced like fireflies from fractured conduits, casting jittery shadows across the tunnel walls. Elias staggered forward, boots crunching on the broken remnants of the trap he had designed to bury the thing. His arm bled from a jagged gash. His shoulder throbbed from the fall, but his grip on the knife hadn't loosened. It was all he had left now. That, and the rage. Behind him, stone shifted. Not a collapse. Not a coincidence. It was pushing through. A section of the debris pile cracked and buckled. Fingers like obsidian sights burst through the rubble, trembling with effort, claws raking across metal. With a guttural, animal sound, the Kshal-Zaret forced its way out. Its armor was scorched, ribbed plates dented from the blast, fluid seeping from beneath where synthetic muscle had torn. But it moved as if the damage meant nothing. As if it were reborn in violence. Elias turned to face it, knife low, breath shallow. This close, there was no bluff. No bombs. No retreat. Just him and the thing he'd lured out of the snow like a devil called from its pit. The creature paused a few steps away, examining him. Then it lunged. Elias barely had time to duck. A taloned arm swept above his head, shearing through the wall, behind him like paper. He pivoted and slashed, the knife dragging across the creature's forearm. Sparks flared. His blade met armor, not flesh, but the impact staggered it for half a second. That was enough. He threw himself sideways, rolled under its second strike, and scrambled to his feet. It was fast. Faster than it should have been in its condition. But Elias had fought it before, and that familiarity gave him a razor-thin edge. They clashed again. He feinted left, rolled right, carved a line along its leg. The Kshal-Zaret screamed, a high-pitched, metallic screech that rattled Elias' teeth. It retaliated with a swipe that caught his ribs, armor splintering under the force. He grunted and stumbled, breath knocked out of him, vision flickering white. The tunnel narrowed. That worked to his advantage. Limited mobility. Less room for the creature to maneuver its full reach. He baited it deeper, each retreat calculated. The pain was growing, but he compartmentalized it. Later. Always later. The creature came at him again, more reckless now, bleeding from a dozen shallow cuts that would have dropped anything human. Elias twisted under the blow and plunged his blade deep into the gap behind its shoulder plate. The Kshulzeret shrieked and slammed him into the wall with a backhanded strike. The knife ripped free from his hand, embedded in the creature's body. Elias hit the wall and dropped hard, stars bursting behind his eyes. It stalked forward, slower now, limping. The damage was real. But so was its fury. Elias dragged himself upright, leaning against the wall. No weapon. No backup. Just the pounding of his heart and the presence before him, a living nightmare carved from war and evolution. And then it stopped. Only a foot away, it stood still. Watching him. Elias met its eyeless gaze, the smooth dome of its head reflecting the dim light. "I could have run," he rasped. The creature tilted its head. "But then I'd never know what you were afraid of," he said. The words hung in the air. Something shifted in the creature's posture. Not confusion. Not hesitation. Recognition. It stepped closer. Elias didn't flinch. Their faces were inches apart now. It reached up, fingers twitching, and pressed one clawed digit gently against the blood-smeared symbol on Elias' chest plate. The Earth emblem, dulled by years of grime and battle. A low, clicking hum came from its throat. A sound Elias had heard only once before, on Kestrel Teen, in that collapsed cavern. Not a war cry. Not a warning. Respect. The moment stretched. He could hear water dripping in the distance, the creak of shifting metal, the ragged thrum of his own breath. The Kshulzeret turned slightly, as if to leave. "Is that it?" Elias asked, voice barely a whisper. "Another test." The creature froze. Then, with one smooth motion, it tore the embedded knife from its own shoulder and dropped it at his feet. Blood and all mixed in its wake. It walked away, every movement deliberate, powerful, slower than before, but no less lethal. And yet, for the first time, Elias didn't feel like prey. He felt, witnessed. When it reached the end of the tunnel, the Kshulzeret turned its head, just enough to acknowledge him one last time. Then it vanished into the dark. Elias slumped against the wall, chest rising and falling in uneven bursts. He bent down, retrieved the knife, and wiped it clean with what remained of his sleeve. It hadn't come to kill him. Not this time. He didn't know if that was mercy or something else. But the game between them had changed. And he wasn't sure he liked what that meant. 3 days later, Elias sat alone on the edge of the ridge overlooking what remained of Outpost Vega. From this height, the ruined colony looked like a graveyard of progress, its skeletal framework half buried in the snow. Smoke no longer rose from the wreckage, and even the cold seemed quieter now, as though the planet itself were holding its breath. His wounds were healing. The medtates had insisted on a full neural scan after extracting him from the tunnels, citing possible trauma-induced hallucinations. He'd played along. Let them run their tests, let them convince themselves he was stable. But the truth hummed in his chest like a second heartbeat. It had let him live. Again. Not out of mercy, not from failure, but by design. Across the ridgeline, a figure approached, moving carefully over the uneven terrain. Ramirez. Her breath puffed in pale clouds, rifle slung low across her chest, helmet tucked beneath one arm. She stopped a few paces from him and said nothing at first, just took in the scene with the kind of practiced caution that came from surviving to many missions no one wrote reports about. "Command wants a full debrief," she said finally. "They always do. They are bringing in a recon team. Science Division 2. They are not sure what to make of your story." Elias didn't look at her. It wasn't a story. She hesitated. "We found the tunnel. What was left of it? Traces of biometal. Blood. Nothing conclusive. But it was there," he finished for her. Ramirez nodded. "Yeah." The silence between them was comfortable, edged with the quiet tension of truth left unspoken. The kind of understanding that could only be forged under fire. He reached into his jacket and withdrew the silver token, thumbing its smooth surface. This thing, whatever it is, it's not just hunting. It's choosing. Testing. Testing what? She asked. Elias met her gaze. Us. Ramirez crossed her arms. You think it's some kind of intelligence assessment? No. Not military. Not scientific either. Something else. Older. Like it's trying to see what we'll become when pushed. She took a slow breath. And what did you become? He didn't answer. Behind his eyes, he still saw the moment when their gazes met, when it had recognized him. Not as an opponent, as a rival, as a reflection. Ramirez broke the silence. Commands talking evac. Full pullback from Virex no. Not worth the losses to secure the site anymore. Elias stood slowly, knees aching, joints stiff from the cold. They are right. But that's not why you are staying behind, is it? No. He turned to face the horizon, where the clouds rolled low and thick over the mountains. Somewhere beyond those ridges, it was watching. He could feel it, not as paranoia, but as certainty. The way a soldier knows when they are marked. He didn't hate it. He feared it, yes. Respected it. But somewhere buried beneath that was something darker, more complex, the understanding that they were no longer enemies in a traditional sense. They were part of the same pattern now. Opposites pulled into orbit. Tell them I'm going dark, he said. Ramirez stiffened. That's desertion, Elias. No. It's containment. This thing doesn't want Earth. Doesn't want conquest. It wants to see what we do when we are left with only ourselves. And what if it decides we are not worth the test? Elias smiled faintly. Then it won't be a test anymore. Ramirez stepped closer, eyes narrowing. You don't have to do this alone. I already am. She didn't argue. She understood in the way only veterans do, that some paths are walked alone because they have to be. She held out a small data slate. Encrypted beacon. One-time signal. You change your mind, hit it. I'll come back. Elias took it, tucked it into his jacket, and nodded. No promises. No lies. As Ramirez turned and headed back down the slope, the wind picked up again, stirring the snow into ghostly eddies. Elias remained at the ridge, staring into the wilderness. His breath was steady now, measured. The fear was still there, buried deep like a splinter, but it no longer dictated his movements. He drew his knife, the same blade he'd driven into the Kshal-Zaretha's shoulder, and turned it over in his hand. The edge was dulled, stained. A relic now, more symbol than weapon. I know you are out there, he said into the wind. No reply came. No movement. Just silence. But he knew. This wasn't over. It never had been. Somewhere beneath the ice, beneath the ruins and centuries of silence, the Kshal-Zaret waited. And for the first time, Elias realized he wasn't preparing to kill it. He was preparing to become what it saw in him. And that, more than anything, terrified him.